All right, welcome to the Week 5 Forum. This week we are dealing with Chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 deals with political parties and the campaign process and the electoral process, where Chapter 8 deals with interest groups. A lot of people basically have a tendency to conflate the two. In American politics, interest groups are oftentimes kind of aligned with political parties. I think it is fair to say that our party systems are comprised of these alliances of interest groups. So it's not surprising that the Democratic Party is closely associated with labor unions in many states, especially public sector labor unions, especially teachers unions, nurses unions, things like that. It's easy to to look at political parties and say, well, I don't like them, either one of them. Part of that, I think, is driven by the fact that so many Americans, I think human beings generally, don't like disagreement, and political parties are innately about competition. One of the main distinguishing points between parties and interest groups is that political parties are there to compete for control of political institutions, whereas interest groups simply want to influence the direction of government. Again, another defining feature of political parties is sort of the importance of parties in structuring government. One mid-century political scientist by the name of E.E. Schattschneider, great name, said democracy is unthinkable save in terms of parties. And what he meant by that was that political parties and interest groups to some extent are very important because they form what we call intermediary institutions. These institutions kind of below the formal levels of government that help people make sense of politics and help them to kind of channel their participation. The United States is one of the few countries that has a two-party system, and if you see a question, why does America have a two-party system? The answer is the rules dictate a two-party system. We have our Constitution has rules governing elections that basically carve up the House of Representatives into what we call single-member districts, and elections that are structured, via single-member districting tend to produce two parties. That's simply the nature of the rules. Because if you don't have some reward for not winning, then it's really hard for more than two parties to form and endure. Now, in contrast, a lot of other countries have what we call proportional representation for their legislative institutions. That means you can finish third and still get some seats, and that typically means that more than one party will form. Political participation, one of the more notable things is that Americans don't vote as often as a lot of other countries. There are reasons for that. In a lot of states, they don't make it easy for people to vote, especially for low-income people. The lower rate of voting is also sort of reflective of the fact that, again, a lot of states are not interested in poor people voting, and to some extent it reflects the fact that we experience greater levels of economic inequality than other more advanced, well, I shouldn't say more advanced, but other advanced industrialized nations. What are some factors that determine, why people vote? One of the things that's, again, another interesting phenomenon dealing with political parties is that more and more Americans are registering as independent. Does that mean that Americans are more independent-minded? What political scientists have discovered is that, there are very few really genuinely independent voters out there. For example, here in Oklahoma, if 30% of the electorate is registered as independent, most of those people are going to vote for Republicans. And likewise in Massachusetts, there's a very large number. In fact, there are more registered independents than there are Democrats or Republicans. But the independents in Massachusetts vote overwhelmingly for Democratic candidates. And so, that kind of highlights the reality that While a lot of Americans are not that thrilled with the electoral process and with the options that they have available to them, they nevertheless are pretty consistently, evoking one, supporting one party or the other. Money is an essential feature of electoral politics, and of course, money is increasingly shaping our electoral process in ways that basically give more voice to wealthier Americans. Money in American jurisprudence or American, election law is considered a form of speech and therefore is protected by the First Amendment. And that means that, people with more money have more speech, more access to speaking within the political arena. With interest groups, again, I think that interest groups are organized in different ways. I mentioned labor unions a little while ago. That is, one of the ways that working class Americans are represented in the political process. Typically, you know, people that are like-minded, that have more access to money, are more effectively organized than people who have less money. There is simply a correlation between that ability to organize and having the resources to develop the administrative capacity to reach out to people and to influence them. The number of interest groups has expanded radically over the course of the 20th century and into the 21st century. The nature by which Americans participate in interest groups has also evolved quite a bit. More and more Americans are simply giving money. They're not necessarily giving their time. It's what a lot of people call checkbook advocacy. Interest groups use a variety of approaches to influencing the political process. One of the most obvious and direct is the idea of lobbying. The fact that, again, if you have resources, you can hire someone who has the ability to get inside of Congress people's offices or executive branch officials' offices, that you can directly lobby the Secretary of Agriculture if you have someone that has the reputation of being able to get inside. And of course, a lot of these folks are former administration officials and they're former members of Congress. Lobbyists, that is a time-honored tradition, and that is sort of how things work. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of Americans look at the governing process and say, my God, it's so corrupt. But in fact, lobbying is again protected activity. It's part of the right to petition government. And so, there are things that you can do, but mainly the main thing you can do is make people divulge where they're getting their money from, and what kind of lobbying activities people are undertaking. So they have to register as lobbyists. So these are some of the main things that we're going to be talking about over the course of the week. Let me hear from you. What aspect of these two chapters do you find most interesting? What aspects are you struggling with? Let's talk about those things, because hopefully, if I know what you're having trouble understanding, I can do a better job of helping you out. So let's have a productive week.